الحضارات النهائية، العنصر العربي والإسلامي. بات من الواضح أننا أمام مخطط متكامل يتحرك بخطوات محسوبة بعناية شديدة. فمنذ بداية القرن الماضي بدأت هوليوود ذراع البطش الإعلامي للماسونية حملة إعلامية منظمة لتشويه صورة العربي، حتى أصبح من البديهي أن العربي في الإعلام الغربي شخصية مرادفة للتخلف والعدوانية والإرهاب، حتى إن العرب أنفسهم صدقوا هذه الصورة النمطية عنهم. الدكتور جاك شاهين الأستاذ الفخري في جامعة إلينوي الجنوبية نشر بحثا في كتاب مهم كشف فيه قيام هوليوود بإنجاز المهمة التي بدأت منذ 100 عام في تشويه صورة العربي، وما زالت تتحرك ضمن مخطط تشير كل الدلائل أننا وصلنا إلى محطته الأخيرة.
Arabs are the most maligned group in the history of Hollywood. They're portrayed basically as subhumans. Untermenschen, a term used by Nazis to vilify gypsies and Jews. These images have been with us for more than a century. For 30 years, I've looked at how we, particularly when I say we, image makers, have projected Arabs on silver screens. In my latest book, Real Bad Arabs, How Hollywood Vilifies a People, I looked at more than 1,000 films. Films ranging from the earliest, most obscure days of Hollywood to today's biggest blockbuster. And what I tried to do is to make visible what too many of us seem not to see. A dangerously consistent pattern of hateful Arab stereotypes. Stereotypes that rob an entire people of their humanity. All aspects of our culture project the Arab as villain. That is a given. There is no deviation. We have taken a few structured images and repeated them over and over again.
You are hostages of the Holy Freedom Bible.
Whether one lives in Paducah, Kentucky or Wood River, Illinois, we know basically the same thing.
Listen to the sound of our God.
من صنع هذا النموذج القاتل؟ ومن جعل منه سلاحا إعلاميا فتاكا ضد العرب والمسلمين؟ ومن يقودهم ليفجروا أنفسهم بين الأبرياء؟ من استخدمهم لإحياء اليمين المتطرف في أوروبا؟ من هؤلاء؟
We know the mythology, namely Hollywood's images of Arabs. Yesteryear's Arab land is today's Arab land. The Arab is one-dimensional caricature, cartoon cutouts used by filmmakers as stock villains and as comic relief. And so over and over we see Arabs in movies portrayed as buffoons, their only purpose being to deliver cheap laughs. You see this in the Joey Heatherton film, The Happy Hooker Goes to Washington.
Every night I was forced to perform unspeakable acts with circumcised dogs.
Oh, dogs are better than sheep. They're cleaner, I know, I've tried both.
The stereotype has become so widespread that it's become invisible to people, and the reason being is that we've all grown up with these images. Just look at television. We now have TV shows telling us that, in addition to the Arab terrorists over there, American Arabs over here are also terrorists. Then there's Showtime's Sleeper Cell. Here a sinister network of Islamic groups operates on American street corners. Any homeless man could be part of this network. Even Western-looking Arabs are part of this anti-American conspiracy. And this paranoia runs deep. So when innocent Arabs are killed, when they're bombed, maimed, wounded, when they're tortured in places like Abu Ghraib, is it really any surprise that we don't feel any compassion? We've been preconditioned to think that those innocent civilians, clones of Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein, are one and the same and do not merit our sympathy, our understanding. And that's very dangerous.
الجدير بالملاحظة أن الخطة بدأت تأخذ ملامحها النهائية من خلال تشويه صورة العربي كقومية وتشويه صورة المسلم كدين، واستخدموا القاعدة لتشويه الإسلام والقادة العرب مثل صدام كنموذج للعربي السيء، والاثنان هما صنيعة مخابراتية أمريكية بامتياز. الذي يثير الشكوك حقا أن يوم الإعلان عن النظام العالمي الجديد هو يوم 11 من سبتمبر من عام 1991 بعد احتلال الكويت من قبل صدام، ويوم الإعلان عن الحرب على الإرهاب هو 11 من سبتمبر من عام 2001 بعد ضرب مركز التجارة العالمي بقيادة أسامة بن لادن. فهل هذه صدفة؟ أم أن لهذا التاريخ أهمية دينية لدى المخططين الكبار؟ لنبدأ من بدايات الخطة الكبرى التي كشفها عميل المخابرات الأمريكية السابق الشهير جون بيركنز في اعترافاته أمام مجموعات جنود السلام الأمريكية المعارضة في مدينة سياتل الأمريكية.
In the early 70s, OPEC didn't like what we were doing in Israel. Same old story. And so they cut off our oil supplies. So some of you will remember these long lines at the gas stations. And we feared we were going to have another depression like the 1929 depression. And so the U.S. Treasury Department came to me and other economic hitmen and said, listen, you know, we can't allow OPEC to blackmail us anymore. You guys got to come up with a plan so this will never happen again. We knew that that plan had to involve Saudi Arabia because it had more oil than anybody else. The deal we finally struck with the House of Saud was a deal whereby they would return almost all the money they made from selling oil to the United States, invested in U.S. government securities. The U.S. Treasury Department would use the interest from those securities, which over the years has amounted to trillions of dollars, to hire U.S. companies to westernize Saudi Arabia, build petrochemical complexes, desalinization plants, whole cities out of the desert, McDonald's and all the other things that go along with our Western culture. The House of Saud would also agree to keep the price of oil within limits acceptable to the oil companies, possibly not acceptable to you and me, but acceptable to the oil companies. And this is very, very important. They agree that they would never, ever sell oil for anything other than U.S. dollars. It was an amazing deal, the deal of the century. It was history-making, incredibly powerful deal that we struck with Saudi Arabia. The corporatocracy looked at this as an incredible success. I had done my job. We economic hitmen did a great job with that one. So we decided that Saddam Hussein ought to accept something very similar. Now, probably a lot of you know that Saddam has been our boy for a very, very long time. You may remember Abdul Karim Qasim, who was president of Iraq in the early 60s. Qasim came up with a unique concept. He said, Iraqi oil ought to go to benefit the Iraqi people. How novel is that? Well, we didn't like that very much. He began to tax the oil companies, particularly the British and some American companies, and threatened to nationalize our oil companies. And so we decided that Qasim had to go. The CIA sent in an assassination team. It was headed by a man who was still going through high school, an Iraqi citizen who was still going through high school. They They riddled Qasim's car with bullets on the streets of Baghdad and missed him. The head of this assassination team was wounded and fled to Syria. His name was Saddam Hussein. He was a CIA agent in those days, an assassin for us. He failed. He was our boy. He was our man. And so, and we sold him a lot of, and gave him a lot of tanks. We built him, Bechtel built him big chemical, I ought to know, my father-in-law was chief architect at Bechtel, built Saddam big chemical plants that were used, and we knew that they were used to make mustard gas and other chemical weapons that were being employed against the Kurds and later the Iranians. We knew this, but we sold him these things. You have to remember that Middle Eastern oil is the oil that's used by a great deal of Europe and China and Japan. If we control Middle Eastern oil, we control our biggest potential competitors, Japan, China, Europe. So it's very important that we do.